Hi,
I'm Amy Lewis Rowe,
and I'm Laura Schmidt.
and we're the co-founders of the Good Grief Network. We're excited that you're joining us for our 10-step program.
We've done this program a lot, and it is a constant evolution of process. We're honing in on it, making it better all the time. And we wanted to share some of our insight with you about what works, creating a container and holding space for people. So we'll spend the next few minutes kind of talking about the things that we've concluded about what works, maybe what doesn't work, and hopefully this will help you feel more held in your process. Where to start? Let's start with the expectations and norms.
Yeah.
So we've created a document of expectations and norms. These are kind of rules for how we operate in this collective space. All of you should have received it and should sign it before we start participating together, before we start holding space together. It is incredibly important that we hold ourselves to a high standard of respect and compassion and self-care, which means there's some wording in there about being able to track our own mental health, not scapegoating another sect of the population or using xenophobic tactics to get our point across. We also talk about how it's not a therapy program, it's a peer-to-peer support program. But yeah, so if you get lost or you sort of forget why we're here, what we're doing, please refer back to the expectations and norms because they will be a great guide for the process.
Thank you, Laura. And the next order of business is why we do not allow crosstalk in the meetings. And what is crosstalk? It is direct reference to someone else's share in a conversational way. And so it gets a little tricky in the sense that you can reference someone's share. I'll give an example of what you are allowed to do in a meeting. This is not considered crosstalk. And that is if I say, when Laura shared this, it made me feel this, which reminded me, and then I go off on my own tangent or path of what I want to share. What we don't want is when Laura said this, I disagreed. Because we're coming together to share where we're at, not to be right, not to prove our beliefs, but to really be present and sit with each other in a space where we can feel deeply, because culturally there's not a lot of spaces for us to go into these heavy feelings in a community setting.
Well, so what if somebody shares something that's really painful for me to hear? How do I respond?
Well, that's where we get into the issue of it's a safe space, but safe does not mean comfortable. What? That's what everybody says when I say that. Safe doesn't mean comfortable. And what I mean by that is you can guarantee it's a safe space and that hate speech will not be tolerated and that your facilitators will make sure that it stays safe in that way. But it is a place, it is a place for people to bring heavy, difficult emotions. And so an example of it not being comfortable is I come from a background where anger wasn't safe in the environments I was in. And so my body is often triggered if someone comes with extreme anger. That doesn't mean that the person bringing the extreme anger is wrong. They're allowed to feel that and to share about where they're at with their anger. Just because my body tenses up and I'm triggered by it doesn't mean that I'm not safe. That's where we get to use our minds and say I'm in a meeting and I'm physically safe. But we also advocate for self-care. And so the good thing about a meeting is the shares are about 3 minutes each. If you're triggered by what someone is saying, take that 3 minutes to kind of focus in on your body, maybe close your eyes, do whatever you need to take care of yourself. You can even turn your camera off and go use the bathroom or something if that's helpful. Although we also encourage folks to kind of sit in the tension and the discomfort that might be stirred up in a meeting, and that's okay. So safety, yes. Comfort, not necessarily. And growth often happens when we're uncomfortable. And so that's something I like to hold on to as we're talking about safety versus comfort.
Well, and I want to go back to the crosstalk idea, right? So I'm not going to directly respond to something you say, even if it stirs something in me. Instead, what we try to do is after somebody shares, we try to validate their share by saying thank you, or I see you, or I hear you. And, you know, we have several people in a group, and after Amy shares, if all of us say thank you, Amy, or I hear you, Amy, that's enough validation to know that I've been heard or that you've been heard. So it's important that we come with I statements from the me perspective and not try to generalize or preach. We really are just trying to be witnessed in our journey and arrive where we are, even if that's messy. It's okay to be messy and not have everything perfectly aligned in our lives. That's probably why we're in the group in the first place, right? Is that we're experiencing a lot of these heavy emotions and we don't have the tools and techniques to regulate them yet. So yeah, it's important that we know we're creating brave spaces, and that for braveness to happen and for growth to happen, it's not always comfortable. And that if we're feeling these points of tension, it's an invitation to look further inward and to explore what's making us feel that. And you said this, but I want to say it in a different way so that it comes across really clear, is that we have to prioritize our self-care in here. We're responsible for taking care of ourselves. So if something's triggering you, if you need to step away, if you need to use the restroom, please do that. Take care of yourself. This is a space where we want you to start figuring out, to start listening to yourself and your needs and tending to those needs so that you can really show up when it's your time to show up.
Yeah. We'll be enforcing time limits on the shares. And the most important thing to note here is that this is where you're going to trust your facilitator, and trust is earned. And so it might take a little practice, or it might take a few meetings before you really start to feel that safety and trust. But what we've noticed is when a facilitator enforces a time limit, usually we'll have some sort of visual cue. Maybe if it's on camera, Laura and I, for instance, raised our hands, and that alerts the person speaking to wrap up what they're saying. If that happens, you don't need to apologize.
In fact, please don't apologize.
And if you do apologize, you don't need to apologize for the apology. This shame response sometimes happens because we're so used to, I guess, defaulting to that we've been taught that we've done something wrong if we have to be cut off. But the job of the facilitator is to keep time for you so that you can flow. And what we mean by that is, just because it's a 3-minute time limit, we don't want you to come with your 3-minute speech to read off a paper and it fits exactly in a 3-minute box. We want you to sink in to your body when you share. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Flow with that a bit. Trust that your facilitator will guide you if there's an issue with time, and that it's important to be mindful of time so that everyone has a chance to share. And in order to do that, it requires a facilitator to keep track and to alert you, but that you've done nothing wrong if you go over time, anything like that.
Well, and Amy's mentioned a 3-minute time limit, and we found that is a time that works for sharing, but it's also really dependent on your group size. So if you have a bigger group size, it's going to be about 3 minutes. If you have a smaller group, there might be more time to share. Another important thing about sharing is we have a rule where before anyone shares a second time, we create space to make sure everyone has had an opportunity to share once. And in our programs, we don't require people to share. You don't have to share. We would like for you, if you're there, to check in and check out so that you're a part of the group and you're invested. But it's okay to sit and listen to other people sharing their perspectives until you're ready to share.
Yeah, do you want to tell about your background in Al-Anon and what that looked like for the first year or so?
Yeah, so I went to adult children of alcoholics meetings for quite a while, and my first stint in it, I didn't share at all. I just sat and learned a lot. And I think what was happening there was I was learning to be with other people's feelings and hear that their stories, when they shared them, were really my stories too. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence to start being able to tell my own story. And so we feel pretty strongly that you don't have to share. It's okay for you to listen and to be present with everyone else. We, of course, invite you to share, and you're welcome to. But if you feel safer, if you're learning how to just be, it's okay to be in the meeting with us, and no sharing required.
We do ask that everyone checks in and checks out for the process, and that's just because if you're going to be sharing a space with one another, it's helpful to know where people are coming from. We have, in the digital realm, had folks who maybe were feeling extra emotional and barely could make it to the meeting, and so they chose to do their check-in via chat. We don't We don't encourage that for every time. We really think it's important to show up and speak, but also what a gift that someone feels safe enough to show up in a meeting when they're that vulnerable and still participate via chat and let the group know. And what's really beautiful is group members will say, the group is holding you. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the chat. So I think it's important, especially if your meetings are digital. Sometimes we can become distracted by the chat feature. We use Zoom for our meetings, and we try to really encourage that the chat is only a space for technological issues if you're having trouble connecting, or if you have resources to share. We don't actually want people responding in the meeting because it's taking the attention away from being present with everyone. So it's really important to us, and your facilitator can make that call, but it's really important to us that that you keep present in the meeting and not be deferring to the chat and responding to people's comments and things like that.
Excellent.
I was going to go into Zoom, but I don't know that everybody's using Zoom.
Right. That probably, we'll let
facilitators.
Yeah, we'll let facilitators do that.
Okay. But gallery view over speaker view if you're in
Zoom.
Yeah,
if you do use Zoom, we prefer gallery view. It creates the group setting a lot more authentically than having one box at a time pop up.
So we are encouraging you to bring your feelings to the meeting and to be held with those feelings. We also acknowledge that the meetings are finite and that they end, and you might still be having heavy feelings or experiencing heavy feelings. So we want to make sure that you can identify a safe person to contact after the meeting or outside of the meeting or before the meeting, anytime that we're not meeting. Do you have a therapist, a partner, a friend, a family member, or even a pet that you can spend some time with and know that?
Or a favorite tree.
Yeah.
I like to talk to trees. Maybe that's a little too hippie to say, but I do.
Basically, you need to have a healthy way to discharge some of these feelings, and it's often a great opportunity if you have someone who can be there to support you. And so we would recommend that when you start this process, can you identify that person who might be safe, a safe person to hold you outside of the meetings? We think that's really important.
And that gets us to body movement. We encourage body movement more and more. The more we do this process, the more we understand how heavy feelings get trapped in our body. And unless we have a way to help move them through, that we can talk all day about healing, but from our heads, but that it's a body experience. And so since doing this work, I've really gotten into dancing, which is a little bit funny because I never saw myself as a dancer, and I have ADHD and wouldn't be caught in a dance class because I can't follow directions very well. And so it's funny how into dancing I've gotten, but I attribute it to our work because dancing is one of the fastest ways to move the grief through my body, and it also doesn't cost money. You don't have to have a gym membership to turn on some music and dance in your house. So that's one of my favorite ways. Walks, swimming, yoga, chair yoga. I teach chair yoga, and I'm a big fan of it. Chair yoga kind of takes the ego out.
Just body movement.
Yeah,
you have
whatever
to move
it takes to move your body. Please do it, because grief and anxiety are heavy, and the constant tension in our bodies can really get in the way of the healing process.
And the other thing we want to recommend is a mindfulness and or meditation practice. This is super important, and we can talk about it, or your facilitators would talk about it, especially around probably steps 6 and 7. But a daily meditation practice will really help ground you in reality. What's real? How do we get there? How do we maintain a personal practice? And actually, the term personal practice, we would really like to invite you to establish one if you're not already doing one, a daily personal practice of body movement and a meditation or mindfulness exercise. When we explore these really heavy feelings, we need to find grounding. We need to be able to get back to being grounded, and those two modalities really help with that.
Yeah.
That's about it. We are so excited to have you along in this journey. We do have a networking website on Mighty Networks. So if you go to goodgriefnetwork.mn.co, you can join the wider network and just chat with us, share resources. We post a lot of our events up there. but the process really works. And I think it's important to note that you get out of it what you put into it. It's a process. So not everything's going to be healed in the hour and a half or 2 hours that you're together. Some of that work needs to be integrated into your life after the meetings. And a lot of these things won't be solved after the 10 steps. You'll have to reintegrate those and the new knowledge and awareness that has been brought by sitting together in 10 weeks, or sitting together for 10 weeks. So we're excited to see you on the other side of your journey, and we wish you a lot of healing and love. And thank you for giving the Good Grief Network's 10-step program a chance.
It's an honor to have you in our program. Thanks.
Cheers.